What's up, Digidestins? Happy holiday for this Monday. I mean, I wanted to talk about something for a little bit that's been kind of just popping in my head occasionally right now. And that's how to get better at trading card games in generalization. It might be Digimon, Lorcana, Magic, Pokemon, any card game that you could think of. There's just some fundamentals that I feel like actually improves you as a better player. There's some stuff that, yeah, we kind of get in those ruts and it just doesn't flow easily with us. Sometimes we kind of just get in our own heads and that thinking really messes us up, and then it makes it really difficult for us to achieve that victory that you want to have. I mean, yes, there are sometimes you might not reach that highest competitive level of, there's somebody always going to be better. I always view that. There's somebody to reach in your strive and your goals. As long as you can get a good game in, I think being able to, if the game is a best of 3, best of 2, best of 1, as long as you can get a win occasionally, or even in best of 3 stances, if we take into account that if you could win one of your games in the best of 3, and it didn't feel like you were completely shut out when it gets down to the 3rd game, that might actually mean a lot. Sometimes you will 2-0 people. Sometimes you won't. There are stuff like this that does come up in every card game. So step 1, I gotta say, if you are going to try to get better at a card game, this happens multiple times. But have you ever heard the old saying, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but often, sometimes, better than a master of one? This is the true saying. And what it means to me is that, yeah, you could be really good at multiple decks and just decent at them. The problem comes down to is that it doesn't always fully apply to card games. Sometimes having multiple decks, yeah, are great because you get to play and get some different strategies and get to have some fun. At the end of the day, though, you should pick one deck and stick with it. That is vitally important. And what do I mean by this? I mean, if you get to the point where you can know the deck in and out, knowing every line, every possibility, you're going to have a better time than going like, oh, this week I kind of lost with this deck. You know what? Let me go pick up another one and see if that's going to throw it against the wall. What you're doing is not learning the deck as its full potential. Maybe there was lines you were missing, which would relate to the other steps in this video, as I'm going to talk about. And that will lead to being what holds you back. If you can't get over step 1 and picking that one deck and sticking with it until you have mastered it to the point where you are the master of one in that, and then you can move on to becoming the master of none in a situation where you could play multiple decks. But not every player has that flow with them. So you want to keep that in mind when you're playing card games, is just picking a deck and sticking with it. It's super important. Step number 2, practice makes permanent. I know you guys have heard practice makes perfect. The truth of the matter is, as a friend of mine told me long ago, and that they learned from their instructor in, what was it? Martial arts, practice makes permanent, not practice makes perfect, because you can do a thing 1,000 times incorrectly and mislearn it, and then you were still doing it 1,000 times wrong. It makes permanent. You need to be able to realize that, even in card games, misplaying that thing 1,000 times because you don't know the ruling correctly, and then when it comes up, you're going to get upset because now that whole combo line you've been thinking of or playstyle doesn't add up anymore. And that can lead to being some struggling steps. So make sure when you are learning your deck and practicing this deck constantly back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, that you know all the correct lines. Then practice that and make that permanent. Know how to think outside that box and be ready to make those random plays that you learned as you were testing this deck. Stuff like that does add up and come up in competitive play all the time. there are sometimes janky outs that you would never think of, and then your opponent just goes ham and just able to out you. And that does come up. And I have no objection on that. So make sure you learn this kind of information when you're practicing, and make sure you do it right. Then step 3, I gotta say, play the strong player. You are not going to get better when you're just beating your friends on the school lot. You might be the best player when you can just break them, you know, making them feel like they're nothing and they're just dust to the wind to you, because you can make sure that you force them into the worst matchup and you're just winning that way. And then when you get into a major event or something like that, all of a sudden this best deck gets river stomped because you were playing like that. I think that comes down to a very fundamental flaw here, is that when you think you're the best player and then all of a sudden a stronger player is above you. I have said this before, there's always going to be a better player. There are some players in major events that have topped multiple times, like Dan, you know, a good friend of mine that I talk to at least a good amount of times. He's a really great Imperial Dramon player, but he also plays a lot of other decks, and he's tops fantastically. He's a strong player. Though I think I've only taken 1 win off of him in a match session. I know I'm not as strong as Dan, but sometimes it's just the way of thinking. Playing that strong player and then going and figuring out and watching what they do, watch their lines of play, watch everything, is huge, because now you're learning as time goes on. Well, if they're playing the deck you want to be playing and learning, playing that mirror match against the stronger player that knows what they're doing, you're learning. They're going to be doing plays that you might have not thought. So learn those avenues that they're trying to do, because the best teacher is a strong player. Your strongest opponent is going to teach you more than your weakest opponent, you know? Stuff like that can lead to being value information and makes you a stronger player at the end of the day. You know, stuff like that is never going to hurt you. So step 4, knowledge is power. Asking questions to your opponent. After you win or lose, never take a loss as, oh my God, no, I'm just so terrible. No. Ask your opponent, what were you worried about? Ask them, hey, was there something I missed? Maybe there was a line of play that could have got me this win or prolonged you from winning. What were you kind of afraid of if I had this? You know, sometimes even after you lost, showing them the hand and going like, was there another kind of play that could have got me the win there? Or was there, during the turns, was I misstepping? Was I, you know, just not getting there? What was I missing? You know, multiple card games, there are some resource systems that if you toss the wrong card at the wrong time can lead to your downfall, because that card should have been played instead of you losing that resource. Stuff like that matters when it comes down to card games and everything in design. So asking yourself, hey, you know, what could I have done better? And never take the loss as what it is. It is not a loss, it's a learning experience. Knowledge is so much power, and community helps you grow. That strong player can lead to giving you knowledge and the power that will get you to reach those heights you need. And everything like that matters when it comes down to gameplay. So just keep this in mind when you're coming down to it. Asking the questions, asking friends or players to watch your game and say, you know what? There's this. Sometimes even after a game where a player lost, I literally told them, this is how you would have won. And I give them the suggestion because they had the out in the win right there, but they tunnel visioned. And sometimes taking that deep breath and step back can lead to getting you that information. You're like, wow, I had the win and I just gave it away. That sometimes just happens. You know, we get that tunnel vision and it just hurts. It hurts. But, you know, stuff like that does matter. Step 5, I gotta say though, play multiple card games. there's sometimes just you get into that really bad format where none of the decks kind of click with you. You're just playing on a wheel. What I learned is that every different card game you play gets you better as well, because you can go back to your old one as long as you remember the mechanics and everything like that. You could be getting better by playing stronger players in other card games because it makes you think outside of the box. Thought processes, everything like that matters. And just sometimes there are just days that you just don't have the value that you needed. What do I mean by that? Well, again, there are just terrible formats where you're just hitting a wall, like you don't like the deck you're gonna have to be forced to play with. You know what? Take a break, go play a different card game for a little bit. Eventually, the game will change up and you'll get back in, and maybe your deck will actually be able to handle a little bit better in the format. But there's sometimes just really bad decks if you choose it. Like if you're walking in with, you know, what? A red hybrid heavy meta, and you walk in with, you know, a deck that takes 4 turns to go live, and they're already killing you by turn 3. I mean, that's kind of just the fallback on it, right? You don't just sit there and just get your head beaten. Sometimes taking a different breather and taking a break from the main card game until you're ready to actually be able to play the game again, and just play something else just to keep yourself busy and practicing, because all these other steps, the knowledge, the practice, playing strong players, and, you know, sticking to one deck does add up in those occasions, because you're gaining that knowledge, you're gaining the viewpoints, and all this stuff adds up, and you just get better and better. There's nothing wrong with that. And at the end of the day, that's what you want to do. And I think that we kind of get into this, you know, issue where we think that, man, oh man, I can only play Digimon. Man, oh man, I can only play Pokemon. No, you can play multiple card games. Just be able to be ready to go back to when you're ready. I think that is vitally important, and it keeps you fresh and be able to play. Taking long-term breaks is never good, because all you're doing is staying stagnant while the other players are getting better. So if you need to take a break, but go play something else to keep your skills fresh. So you're thinking constantly, developing skills, developing play styles, developing lines, because eventually that's what's going to happen, is you're going to be ready to take on the world. And when that happens, I'm going to pray for you guys that you reach the top and hit the stars that you want. But, you know, at the end of the day, we're only as good as we can limit ourselves. And I think we have a chance to grow as players at anything. So guys, what did you think of this video? Did my steps actually matter, make you think of other possibilities? You know, are these good advices, or would there be something else that you would add onto it? Let me know down in the comments. So guys, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you next one. Peace.